Welcome to A Ride on the Outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Yes, it's time for another edition of the MMA Outsiders. That's Zain Bando. I'm Tom Albano. This is episode 17. Zain, I want to talk to you about something. So, we always use the expression that these things happen in MMA and to always be prepared for situations that kind of developed. And, well, a situation did kind of develop that I was not expecting that kind of threw a wrench in this episode's plans. But not in a bad way, in a pretty good way. And that is, we have our very first special guest interview. Yes, 17 episodes in, we finally have a special guest. We finally have a little fighter to interview to include in this episode. And Zain, oh my God, it's a big one. It's Danny Sabatello, who faces Raufeon Stots, semifinal in the Bantamweight Grand Prix interim Bantamweight Championship fight next week, December 9th, Bellator 289. I cannot wait for you guys to see this piece. It was just me and Danny. Like I said, a bit of a last-minute development, so Zain wasn't there. But Zain was there, as mentioned on last week's episode, at Bellator 288 in Chicago, where Sabatello was born, where they were promoting this Sabatello Stots fight. And we'll get more into just the madness that is this fight and all the hype that is surrounding it. Before we get into anything, make sure to hit that like button, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to follow us across the social media pages that you see scrolling across the bottom. I'm Tom Albano. You can follow my work at Fansided MMA. That's Zain Bando. You can follow his work at bjpen.com. So, Zain, I mean, all that's going on with Danny Sabatello and Raufeon Stots, I mean, again, I think I said this last week, this is an interim title fight. This is a semifinal bout in the tournament. But it feels like one of the biggest fights in recent Bellator history.
Yeah, and as you'll hear in a little bit, that is the question I posed to them. Is this the biggest male Bellator fight in the history of the promotion? And essentially, both of their answers was absolutely. And, it was just interesting to hear the banter back and forth. We were talking off air that actually we didn't know that Sabatello and Stots were going to have an impromptu press conference the night of the fight. We were literally told by Bellator officials that if you guys want, Stots and Sabatello are here to promote the fight December 9th. If you guys want to ask them questions, and it was madness. It was to the point where the first question from a media member, and I'm sorry, but I don't remember who asked the first question, but all I can tell you is that literally the first question from this person was, just go. They literally just started saying probably about 4.5 minutes of banter to one another, and I think every single media person that was there literally tried not to laugh. I think I was one of the few that couldn't hold it in long enough because I knew it was going to be entertaining. But yeah, I mean, for sure, I've never been at a press conference like that. As media, I've been to McGregor Poirier 3 as a fan, and that press conference was crazy. But to actually be at that press conference for Sabatello and Stots and to be able to ask a question for a interim title fight that felt like a Grand Prix final was pretty cool. And had I not gone to that press conference, I don't think I would be as excited for this fight as I already am. And I can't believe we're a week out from it. And Tom, kudos to you for getting the last minute interview because that's been something we've been trying to work towards for a while, is having guests on this show, and to have the man that they call Shock the World as our first one, with the chance to shock the world December 9th, if you will, is pretty cool. So yeah.
Yeah, and I got to give a shout out then to Bellator for helping to make it happen. So I'm excited to show that over to you guys. But of course, we got plenty of fight news that we got to talk about. And Zain, Zan, how many times is this going to happen where we say that it would take a miracle for one of these fighters to win, and I pose the question of what if, just the what if it happens, and guess what, the what if happened again. In this case of the PFL, Larissa Pacheco is the 2022 women's lightweight PFL champion. Kayla Harrison undefeated no more in a 48-47 straight unanimous decision in the main event of the PFL Championships pay-per-view. Zan, I don't know what to say anymore. This has been the year of upsets.
Yeah, first off, I have to owe you an apology again. That's the third time since we started this podcast where three massive upsets have taken place, and you've essentially predicted that all three would happen.
Not that I predicted, but I used the what if scenario.
Yeah, there was one in particular though that you were pretty confident on, and it is the one that happened a couple of weeks ago. So I have to give you that. But yeah, this is straight madness. Can you remember a year in MMA? Because I can't. Where there were just so many upsets in such a short amount of time, to where I can't even recall the last time that we had so many belt changes and just wacky stuff take place.
And that's the thing, Zan. All three of these fights, not just one, all three of them were title fights.
It's true. All three of them were title fights, and two of them ended in emphatic fashion. And honestly, this third one almost ended in emphatic fashion too. If you saw the fight, which I know you and I both did, Harrison was nearly knocked out before, of course, before, of course, losing the decision, which just goes to show you that anything can happen in the sport. And as we predicted a week ago, the worst case scenario happened for the PFL right in front of their very eyes at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden on ESPN Plus pay per view. The perfect storm of just shit, if you will, took place, and it literally couldn't have been any worse from a business standpoint for the PFL. And to be honest with you, Pacheco did what everybody thought that she needed to do, but nobody thought she actually could do it, and that's the most amazing thing. And you could just tell Harrison was a little bit too overconfident, and she paid for it. And for anyone who likes upsets, this was a pretty darn good upset, and it capped off what was a pretty phenomenal card. If you were able to make it through the whole thing, it actually turned out to be a pretty phenomenal card that had a ton of finishes on it. I think it was either 5 out of 7 or 6 out of 7 ended in a finish on the main card, which is pretty cool.
It was a pretty solid night of action. I want to say 4 or 5 were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 out of the 7 in the main card, and then 4 out of the 5 on the prelims ended in a finish.
Okay, so that's good. So that's 8. That's 8 fights out of what, 12 that were on the card?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so that's 8 finishes out of 12, which is a solid night when you really look at it in the grand scheme. But this is interesting. I think it creates some parity at the PFL weight division, because now it's like, okay, does Harrison get back into the tournament next year to see if she could get her revenge and get her $1 million back that she basically not threw away, but maybe was a little bit too overconfident and lost. And is Pacheco one hit wonder? This is PFL's version of probably when Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey, and it'll be interesting to see if they capitalize on that, because obviously we never saw that Holm-Rousey rivalry continue after UFC 193. So maybe the PFL can finish something that the UFC was unable to really start, which was a colossal trilogy that transcended women's MMA. And although women's MMA is slowly but surely getting bigger, and maybe this is one of those rivalries that puts it over the edge to a place that no one would have really expected. So it's just something to think about. But that's what the fight reminded me of, was when Holm beat Ronda Rousey.
I mean, two different levels when you compare UFC and PFL. But yeah, this was the major upset. This is, I think, the biggest upset in the history of the Professional Fighters League, even stretching back to when it was the World Series of Fighting. I think this is also not just the most. This is. I'll give you one better example that actually I think we made reference to last week. This is not just their Holly Holm. This is their Seth Petrozelli moment. This with the Golden Goose has just been slaughtered for the first time, and now what happens with the Professional Fighters League? So, what happens with Kayla Harrison? So, let me start with this. Kayla Harrison is still the face of the PFL, correct?
Oh, 100%.
She that does not change with this.
Would you agree? Would you agree with me that let's just throw out a random number because we don't know this for sure, but would you agree with me that let's just say 30% of purchasers of that fight probably didn't know who Pacheco was, but knew who Kayla Harrison and was 100%, which was the only reason why they were tuning in to see it.
I could see that. I could see something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. So my point in saying that is, do people now gravitate towards Pacheco because now there's this newfound rivalry with Harrison, to where now this series of fights can just continue for as long as possible, almost like a Moreno Figueiredo type of thing. But I don't know. Like, to be honest with you, until Pacheco started fighting Harrison, I didn't know who Pacheco was. So
I second that. I second that. I think, Zan, the other thing is it kind of depends on how many purchases this pay-per-view got. So I guess let's transition. We'll go back to this topic, but let's go to the other part. So, like we mentioned last week, I was not a fan of this decision to put these fights on ESPN Plus exclusive pay-per-view in the United States for $49.99. I don't know how many purchases they would get. There's also supposedly it wasn't on pay-per-view internationally. It was only in the United States. I don't know what viewership outside of the US was like. And I don't know, Zan. I feel like this pay-per-view price on top of the fact that the Golden Goose kind of lost says something bad.
yeah, and maybe you don't know this, so you can say that you don't know, but I'm curious, what was the way to watch it overseas? If you know, was
Um,
was there a way to see it?
I could have sworn. I will double check here on the Twitterverse, but they definitely did not do ESPN Plus.
Okay. Yeah, so kind of back to what I was saying, I think it was in August that this was announced, right? Something like August or September
Yeah.
they were going to do this.
So just for reference, you'll know this tweet. Ariel that night posted, "Are you ordering the pay-per-view tonight?" as a poll.
Right.
91% said no, and that was out of 49,000 votes.
That's insanity.
MMA on point. Just curious, who here purchased the PFL pay-per-view? Purchase, did not purchase. 96% of 4,600 said did not purchase. So this is kind of a little bit of a concern here when it comes to the PFL, but and actually Andy Hickey pointed out on Twitter that PFL are going to pay a combined $6 million because that's each division winner gets $1 million, right?
Right.
For them to reach the amount that they're paying out, they would need 120,000 pay-per-view buys.
Which obviously we don't know the numbers yet, but I highly doubt it even came close to that number. Not even close.
Not if those polls are telling. No.
Right. Well, I can say this. What I was originally going to say before you dove into that, which by the way, thanks for the analysis on that. That was very helpful. What I was gonna say regarding that is they made a few mistakes here. Number one was they put it at the Hulu Theater in Madison Square Garden. No, nothing wrong with MSG, but the problem is the Hulu Theater doesn't have the same pop as like the regular Madison Square Garden or or the T-Mobile Arena or the Hard Rock, or even doing the fight in Arizona or Miami, doing it somewhere where there's an actual fight connection, like to the brand and to the sport. I'm not saying the Hulu Theater isn't that, but what I am saying is that the Hulu Theater, I would say, is more so reserved for, ESPN top ranked boxing events and that sort of thing. So I feel like to do it there is kind of out of touch, number one. Number two, the price tag being $50 is inexcusable. When the PFL is on ESPN Plus, like regular ESPN Plus, all year for the entire season, why confuse people who have been watching it the whole season and now you have to pay $50 to watch the finale? It's like if you and I were going to watch Survivor or The Sopranos and you turn on CBS or NBC and we watch every episode of the series, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, for the season finale, episode 12, you got to go to Peacock and purchase the last episode of the show for a certain amount of money, even if you already are a Peacock subscriber. Like, okay, whatever. And it's like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. So there's also that, and the fact that it was on Black Friday, Friday night after Thanksgiving, when there's college football on, and the NBA and the NHL, and it's all happening at the same time. Not to mention that the World Cup is going on. So there's
hours after the U.S. and England had just competed.
Right, and it's like you could have done a better job promoting it. Like, I didn't see it on any of the tickers or barely any of the tickers the whole week. Like they just dropped the ball. Oh, and I'm not trying to speculate here, and not to mention PFL's PR team confusing members of the media who were actually at the event and covering it too.
Oh yeah, so there was I was going to mention also, Zan, before we get into that Kayla Harrison herself was appearing on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, and maybe, I know people thought maybe she was being a little too pretentious comparing herself to Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg, but I think she got one thing right, which is kind of damning on the PFL, and that is that Kayla Harrison was not happy with the way the pay-per-view was kind of marketed. And yeah, I kind of agree with her, because I didn't really see any ads for it in the same way that you saw ads for the UFC. Now, granted, we're talking the UFC versus the PFL, who's probably number 3 or number 4 in the world MMA promotion rankings. But still, if you're gonna put a $49.99 price tag of 6 championship fights with $6 million prizes and all the different star power that you had, I would expect more promotion for it. And it was just there.
I'm sorry, I hate to compare it to this, but it literally feels like it. And tell me if I'm like not on the right track, but I really do feel like I am. And that is, this event felt like Affliction Day of Reckoning or Affliction Band, where you just knew that it was too good to be true. And it's almost like if they keep trying this, something's gonna burst. Because that's exactly what happened with Affliction. Obviously, they lost their company partnership with the UFC. They lost the money that they did, and they were never able to recuperate enough, and ended up going under. And all of those fighters either ended up going to the UFC or going overseas because they had nowhere else to go. I'm not saying that this is the same thing, but if they keep going down this path, it could very well become that same thing.
I mean, yeah, you think back to the Josh Barnett thing, how Josh Barnett popped and basically canceled the whole third Affliction pay-per-view event, which pretty much sunk the promotion then and there. Not like it was bad enough at the start, but yeah, Zan, kind of getting a not so great vibe. I mean, the action itself was great, but it was not worth $50. Plus, Zan, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but it just felt like another PFL. I shouldn't compare, because that's regular season versus playoffs and championship, which helps make the PFL for what it is. But what we saw this year with the PFL championship, not taking the results like the upset out of the equation, it felt like last year's championship and the 2019 champion. Like, it wasn't anything more special that made it worth the $50.
True, like there wasn't really a special intro to the beginning of the card, or
I mean, you had Wiz Khalifa doing a little rap concert at the beginning, which
right,
okay.
which it's like whatever. It made me feel like I was watching UFC 31, but yeah, it's like there wasn't the flair that you'd get from like a UFC event with a pay per view, for example, where like like how it's gonna look on TV and how it's gonna be presented. And yeah, it did just feel like a regular PFL card, which I guess is good for like consistency purposes, but this is pay per view we're talking about. Like, not
$50 pay-per-view.
right, like not having a pre or post show, like it really didn't make sense.
It's I don't know what it is, and now like you kind of mentioned, actually let me bring up who was it? Kratos that had the issue with the media.
Yeah, so for those of you guys who aren't familiar with the Twitter sphere, there's an account and the account's name is Kairos MMA, and he makes these like really funny like MMA like opinionated videos that get a lot of views because he uses pop culture and other things to kind of relate to the sport and all that. And he in since deleted tweets, he basically described going to the PFL event as a member of the media, driving 10 hours to New York City, only to be told by PFL PR that they were scrapping people's credentials for literally no reason. And then eventually he was told in a follow up email that the communication that he had previously received was incorrect. And I actually spoke to, I guess you could say, a colleague of mine now, Dylan Rush, who writes for Fight Club, and he was there covering the event. There were no issues with credentials at all. So I don't know if it was just him or other media members that ran into this issue, but apparently PFL dropped the ball in terms of confusing people that thought they had credentials, didn't have credentials, but really did. So, well, then eventually Kairos ended up going home and driving 10 hours back to wherever he's from. And it was just an unfortunate situation because, you're trying to make a good first impression. A lot of us are still coming up in the business. I don't know if this was his first event as credentialed media or not, but I can tell you this, for the first ever pay-per-view, and I'm not trying to call any specific person out here, but for the first pay-per-view, this just felt like a really bad a really bad look for the PFL PR team and just everybody involved.
I think the only thing that was a win was really the in cage action, which again, I don't know if necessarily was any different that it was worth the $50. Now, if you had I kind of like our poll that we did, our small little poll, because I kind of agree what it was saying that if it was just $9.99 or $19.99, yeah, maybe I'd cough up that money, and I still did because I want to support the PFL in this case, but it just wasn't worth it. And now they're talking about if it's true what they were talking about at the end of last year, earlier this year, about pay-per-view expansion, having fighters like Kayla Harrison leave the season tournament format and
only go to
showcase.
And only go to pay-per-view divisions, which would be weird in my opinion.
And you say pay-per-view divisions, like how many pay-per-views are they planning? Because like if you're telling me there's going to be like 6 or 7 PFL pay-per-views a year for $50 combined with the Challenger International series that they're doing before the season, and then the season itself with its ESPN, I don't know. Like, I know we talk about with the UFC about, hey, it's good versus, the pros versus the cons of having a card every single week, but it feels like, Zen, the PFL is eliminating what makes it special. I shouldn't say eliminating because the season format and such would still be there, but it's kind of de-emphasizing what made it special.
Yeah, I could see that. But on the flip side, though, with the UFC having weekly cards, at least you know what you're going to get. Ever since, I would say, 2017 or 18, they've had this streak of, there's a UFC event every weekend. And I think it really started near the end of the Fox deal and into the ESPN deal where they really wanted to pound the whole thing of, okay, 42 shows a year, Dana White Contender Series, mostly ESPN Plus. ESPN Plus has exclusive rights to the pay-per-view. Like, we knew what we were going to get when this deal started with the UFC. And I just feel like PFL is plopping this into our lap, so to speak. And they basically want us to want us to figure it out ourselves, and we really can't, because as much as I watch MMA as much as I can, I mean, I'll be the first to admit to you that there are regional promotions that I have to openly admit that I don't know a ton about, just because there's a ton of MMA every single week, and you got to pick and choose what you want to watch. And it's like, if PFL wants us to watch all of these events, it's like these 7 pay-per-views better be stacked, or those people just aren't going to care.
I mean, Zain, I'll be the first to admit, Ryzen. For as much as I like Ryzen, and I know it's the successor to Pride Never Die, I don't watch the Ryzen shows because I just don't have it in me to. Because sometimes they're after UFC events that purchase another pay per view and stay up even longer. Because here on the East Coast, the UFCs don't even end until 1, 2 in the morning.
Yeah, and
That
I can relate, being from Chicago. The events over here don't end until 12:35 a.m. every month.
Right. And as somebody who has a Monday through Friday full-time job, I just don't have that in me. So, I want to support everywhere that I can that's not the UFC, because obviously I'll support the UFC, but I want to support all these other promotions, your Bellator, your PFLs, your One Championships, your Ryzens. But for PFL, like going back to what I said before, if they're going to run 7 pay-per-views, say at $50, I'm going to have to pick and choose which ones I even purchase, because this is already I think this was already established enough during the pandemic, but you consider the subscription to ESPN Plus, the different ESPN Plus pay-per-views being the 12 UFCs, any boxings you want to see, throw in a PFL card, the DAZN subscription, and that mess of a circus of a streaming service. Those of us who are professional wrestling fans add in another $4.99 for Peacock and whatever other streaming service. It's expensive to be a combat sports fan and a combat sports media member.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at this stuff as an investment. I mean, that's for sure. But it's almost like you'd rather want to go to all of these events that you want to watch to save the money from paying to watch them on TV, is what it honestly
and
feels like.
Zen, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another thing. The PFL, and they kind of have promoted this, that they promote themselves as being an event to sit and watch and not exactly go to, if you get what I mean. Like, obviously media a little different, but they want the at-home experience, promoting, all their little fight statistics and the smart cage and everything.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to take a dig at them either, but it feels like I'm watching a rebranded version of the IFL at times.
And I mean, no, and I mean, I give them credit for trying to be innovative, but don't talk down the fact, like if I want to go see the PFL, I want to purchase a ticket and be there live in person because I want to see MMA live in person,
Yeah,
that's me. Like that's something great.
Which, by the way, the one PFL card that I did go to, this is before they instituted the playoffs and what have you.
So it was 2017, like right after they turned from World Series of Fighting, or
no, it would have been 2019, so the same year as
so they were in the season format then.
Yeah, they just hadn't like it was during I think it would have been season 1 is what I'm thinking it would have been. Is that right?
I think 2. 2018 was 1, but 2019 was the first they did the women's tournament.
Okay. But yeah, I went there and it was at the Chicago Theater, and it was when they were trying to branch out. Like they did one in Washington, they did one in Chicago, which is the one I was at, and they did one a couple other places. But the one thing when I went to that event, it just felt, I'll never forget it. It was at the Chicago Theater, and I sat literally 4th row from the cage, and not. But the interesting thing about that was it just didn't feel big to me. There really weren't banners promoting the event outside. There were T-shirts and stuff which were cool. I got one of those, but it didn't feel like it was a really big event as to what it should have been. And I feel like that's still where PFL is. is lacking, because you mean to tell me that you're going to do a PFL Champions pay-per-view and a promo isn't in my face every single day reminding me to watch the card? Like, that's what I was hoping, because the more you see the promo, the more you get excited to see the event, right? And therefore it didn't feel that way to me, in my personal opinion.
So now, taking all that we just said and talking about, what the future is for Kayla Harrison, because we kind of established it last week. We established in our DMs right after the upset happened, and we'll establish it here again. Cyborg fight, going over to the UFC for a Nunes fight, both off the table now. With that loss. Gone. Finito. Done. Not happening. So now if you're the PFL, I saw a couple of our fellow media members suggest this. Now maybe for the PFL, this could be a positive, because now you can promote a next pay-per-view and have Kayla Harrison versus Larissa Pacheco 4. The thing is, like you just mentioned, like we were just talking about, Zain, if they're going to have the same level of promotion like they had for this pay-per-view, is that really going to end up? It's not, I was going to say, is it really going to be that much of a success?
True. And tell me if this is out of left field, but imagine my little scenario here. So Pacheco versus Harrison 2 is going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. But let's just hypothetically say it's in July. It's on 4th of July weekend. And the PFL goes and does something out of left field, and they put Pacheco versus Harrison in Vegas, either at the Palms or the MGM Grand. Do you think that if they built a card around it and they promoted it ahead of time and early enough with decent fights from, let's say the $1 million winners that won last season's tournament, and include those on the card to make it kind of like a super reunion type of card of sorts, do you think it'd sell well? Because I really do think the PFL in the right venue is what's going to make it sell well.
I was going to say sell well in terms of, like, obviously it would not get to UFC levels, but could he? This is what I'll say. If they promote it right, could they break 50,000 buys? Yeah. If they did something like that, Harrison Pacheco 4 as the main event, and you threw in some champions on there, yeah, I think it could break 50,000 buys.
What do you think? What do you think of my Vegas idea?
I think Vegas would work well. I mean, Vegas is the fight capital of the world. There are several fight capital. I mean, there's two big fight capitals. It's Las Vegas, New York. Then you have Chicago. I would consider like your 1B or your 2. For whatever reason, Dana and company, and I guess they kind of have a point in trying to make the Middle East, Abu Dhabi, the next big point for fights, for a fight capital. But
I've never considered Chicago to be that big, but the UFC still needs to bring a big fight here, and then I'll consider it to be like one of the top destinations. But for sure, Vegas, New York, and Abu Dhabi would be the 3 biggest MMA wise that I could think of for sure.
And right now, obviously, Abu Dhabi would be out because I see the PFL trying to get an international foothold. I think the England cards work very well. I think they should continue to establish a base there and maybe a base in Canada for that matter, in terms of the outside the U.S. kind of sphere. But, I mean, they still got to get some sort of foothold here. And I think a pay-per-view in Las Vegas at one of the old UFC places like the Palms would work very well. Like I said, work very well to the point where they break 100,000. Absolutely not. Break 50,000. Yeah, but again, you also have to price this right. You cannot do another $50 pay-per-view event. You can't.
No, you can't. And
especially if it's a mid. Especially, sorry, Zain, if it's a mid-season one like you're suggesting.
Oh, for sure. And if they ever decided to do a card like that, I would definitely consider going, just because it would be like their first big event in like a massive MMA market. I'm not saying New York isn't that, but I just feel like Vegas is different. You bring a fight there, and the stakes are already much bigger than what they were, the first time or the previous event even. And I just feel like the PFL has yet to establish a true home base where you know that this is the official or unofficial home of the PFL, if you will. And as you were alluding to earlier, this upset may end up being a good thing because obviously, like you said, there's going to be some parity now in that division, and the rivalry could very well continue and it could get very interesting. But if they want to capitalize on this fourth fight, they have to get the venue right and they have to put a solid card around it. And if they can do those two things, it's going to be very successful. I think our whole argument is the PFL needs to stop confusing the fans. They have to make it as easy as possible for people to watch it. And like I keep alluding to every single time this topic comes up, why the hell is it an ESPN Plus exclusive? Put it in bars. Be able to let people buy it on their regular.
They were able to put it in bars, supposedly, according to somebody.
Oh, that's good, but still, what I was going to say too is you should be able to buy it on your TV.
I agree. This, but I guess it goes with this whole ESPN Plus exclusivity thing. But Zan, you know what I think also helps with that? I think I've been saying enough to make it a $50 pay-per-view. 10, 20, even 30 max dollars. Fine.
Yeah, anything $50 plus. Yeah, anything $50 plus should really be reserved for UFC events and major boxing events. The PFL just isn't at that level yet. It's as simple.
No.
It's as simple as that.
What did you think of the rest of the card, though? I mean, Brendan Loughnane, your champions, Larissa Pacheco, women's lightweight, Brendan Loughnane at featherweight, Ante Delija at heavyweight, Olivier Aubin-Mercier at the lightweight, Sabatu Sai at the welterweight, and Rob Wilkinson at light heavyweight. I think I got 5 out of the 6 champions correct.
That's pretty darn good.
Oh no, 4 out of 6. 4 out of 6.
And how did I do? Did I do worse than you?
I got 4 out of the. Yeah, I think I got 4 out of the 6, and I think you got 3 out of the 6.
Okay, so we didn't do terrible, but
no.
Yeah, I'd say Loughnane might be the best non-UFC success story in MMA that I've seen in a very long time. That guy goes from being snubbed on Dana White's Contender Series just 2.5 or 3 years ago to being $1 million winner and not giving up on his dream. And it's clearly the biggest missed signing in the history of Dana White Contender Series, bar none. It's not even close.
And yet I think it was the best thing to ever happen to Brendan Loughnane, because he would not have had the chance to be a millionaire. And you know what? Yeah, maybe the PFL, I'm not too familiar with the PFL's pay structure. Maybe it doesn't end up as well for those who don't win the $1 million. But you know what? He took a chance on himself. 2021 season, he had some struggles, but this season he ended up pulling it out, and he ended up doing very well for himself. And now I would say if he manages his money right, he's financially set.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, he was the one that stood out to me too, and happy for old UFC and Rob Wilkinson also getting the job. And he fought in the UFC several years ago, and it's
got cut after losing to Israel Adesanya,
which is pretty crazy to think about. Also, right, considering the level of stardom that Adesanya's been at ever since.
Prelim card was actually pretty good. The amateur bout with Biagio Ali Walsh, the grandson of Muhammad Ali, he looked great. Magomed Karamov and Gleason Tebow in a teammates matchup was interesting to watch. Natan Schultz looks great as always, and Shayman Moraes winning the Moraes versus Moraes battle. So now Marlon has to change his last name to something else.
Did you see the live betting odds going into the last round? Marlon was like a minus 2,500 favorite and lost, which is absurd to me.
It's absurd, and yet we've kind of seen Marlon take leads in fights at the end of his UFC run and then lose them. I mean, he actually was doing pretty well for himself when he was fighting Henry Cejudo for the bantamweight title, and then Cejudo, Moraes just kind of ran out of gas in that fight back in 2019.
That's true. That's also something to think about as well. Overall, quality wise, I give this card an A minus. In terms of everything else around it, I would give it a D. Um, I guess my only other message to the PFL is come back with a vengeance, try again next year, and try to make all of us MMA enthusiasts actually like be really proud to purchase your event, because you guys made this kind of as hard as you possibly can make it. So yeah, and
Yeah,
you put it on the wrong day.
yeah. So I still love the PFL. I'm always going to support it, but yeah, this wasn't
Like
the best. I agree, Zan. A minus for the action, and D for everything else. So what does that average out to? Like B minus, a B minus or C plus or something like that for
I say
overall?
B minus.
B minus, yeah. Uh, so we've been talking about this for 40 minutes. Let's get on to other things. Plus, we still got our Danny interview we got to get to. So this news kind of broke. We talked about it on social media in a little breaking news segment. Jiri Prochazka has vacated the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. So UFC 282, if you were under a rock from last week, if you weren't paying attention because you were busy doing Thanksgiving things, completely different now. So Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev, which was going to be a contenders battle that was featured on the main card, has now been moved up to the main event. It will be for a vacant championship. Jiri Prochazka suffering a shoulder injury that is so severe that the UFC doctors, according to Dana White, have called it one of the worst shoulder injuries that they've seen. Glover Teixeira, where is he involved in all this? Well, supposedly he reportedly turned down a new fight. According to the initial reports, Glover had been offered Magomed Ankalaev, but for whatever reason, they went to Ankalaev and not the former champion Blachowicz. Don't ask me why. Teixeira turned it down. Teixeira, according to a news statement that has been released since our live stream, between the breaking news live stream and now, said that basically he just asked for more time. He wanted it at UFC 283, which in his home country of Brazil. But obviously UFC 282 would have been kind of screwed with no other title fight, and so the fight was basically taken away from Glover. So we got Jan versus Magomed as the new main event, and Jiri will fight the winner once healthy. So Zan, obviously, again, you were there with me on the live stream, but ever since then, now that we have Glover's official statement, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate. He feels like he's getting screwed by the UFC. And I honestly don't blame him. I mean, he's been an OG of the sport for, nearly 2 decades now. You would think that they would give the champ a little bit more time, but, this is kind of what happens with the UFC. Sometimes they get a little complacent and they have too many cards. And this is one of those scenarios where they really didn't have a suitable main event that wasn't already booked. So this is the situation that they were in. It's unfortunate that they couldn't shift some things around and maybe, move the real main event of Moreno versus Figueiredo to this card. Maybe it would have not been enough time for either fighter, even though both of them were in camp. But, it is what it is. And I really hope for Glover's sake that he does get the next title shot, because he should. He was the champion. He's earned it. And it's just unfortunate that Blachowicz versus Glover couldn't get it done, because it literally would have been number one versus number two in the division. And now we're not getting that at all, which
I don't. I'm sorry, Sam, but I have no idea, again, trying to emphasize why the UFC went for Glover versus Magomed instead of Glover versus Jan.
Wait, sorry, say that again?
I said I have no idea why the UFC went with Glover versus Ankalaev, which Glover supposedly had turned down, rather than Glover Jan.
Well, I think the UFC didn't want to see that fight because they've already seen it.
I guess so, yeah.
And they think that Glover is getting up there in age, and they don't think people would want to see it. But I would actually have to disagree. I think a lot of the MMA community would want to see that again.
I think a lot of the MMA community would disagree, Sam. I think we want to see Glover Teixeira.
Agreed.
But
hey, you got to admit though, this new fight this new fight, we'll obviously get into this more next week, but this new fight is very, very, very stylistically entertaining, or could
Yeah,
be rather.
could be, absolutely. And Zan, you know who else this is a big plus for? Paddy Pimblett, because now he gets moved up to the co-main event.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big opportunity for Paddy Pimblett, an even bigger stage to quickly rise up his star and rise up the ranks. Zan, one other thing though. Going back, I want to present a thought on this episode that I presented on the live stream. And now that we have Glover's side, maybe, I don't know if your thoughts have changed. Could this have maybe played a little bit of a reason why, like the day before the news had broken on our episode, like when we were recording our last episode, we had just gotten the news that John Jones was finally going to fight, that they were going to go through with Jones and Ngannou in March, and Blades would be the backup plan, and Stipe was just on the outs. Could a situation something like this have been a little motivation for the UFC of, because remember, this was supposed to be the John Jones return card, and those plans never came to fruition. I'm saying, was this a bit of a fire under the UFC? Like, oh shit, we need to get our shit straight. We need Jones in the octagon ASAP.
Yeah, and if they really wanted him in the octagon ASAP, then he should be at the top of the card, in my opinion. It's like, it's a UFC, really? Like, you keep pushing for this, and it's like, now it seems like it's kind of on them or it rather that there's been a holdup, and I feel like in so many ways they kind of did this to themselves. Am I too far off in saying that? Because I personally don't feel like I am.
No, you're right. This was on the UFC. Again, this is where the constant weekly cards do come back to bite them. This is where the long negotiations come back to bite. And Zen, I can't necessarily 100% fault the UFC. Like we were going back when we were talking about the Jones Miocic thing. I don't think Stipe had any leverage to say, I want a heavyweight title fight. Yeah, he's the heavyweight GOAT. Yeah, he did defend the title more than anybody else, but the way he lost to Ngannou, I mean, think about it, Dan. After the way Cyborg lost to Nunes, she was quickly ridden out. You didn't think that the way he lost to Ngannou, he was going to get an immediate title shot. And he has also been out of the octagon for a while, just like Jones has now. So at this point, the UFC, I think my point, Xander, I'm going at is we can't keep holding up the heavyweight division any longer. We got to get something going. And Jones was been wanting to go to heavyweight. Fans have wanted to see him go to heavyweight. At this point, tick-tock. Especially, Zan, if you're the UFC and you're going to want to do 2 pay-per-views in March, one in the US in Vegas, plus one later that month in London for the big Edwards-Usman 3 fight. If that's the case, you need something to sell in early March or even after the London card in April pay-per-view. You need something big to keep fans interested and keep having them spend money. And one of those pay-per-views, Zan, who better than a returning John Bones Jones?
There's nothing better than that.
So at this point, it's a must for the UFC. Like we said last week, it's a must. We got to see him on this March card in Vegas.
100%. Absolutely. But there's more because we have fights to talk about this weekend. But before we get into that, there's some news. We had mentioned the term golden goose. I think there's another golden goose that people are pretty much gravitated towards, even though he only fights once every couple of years. That's right. Conor McGregor is inching toward a 2023 comeback. Tom, when have we seen this before?
Zen, all I'm going to do, part of it's because my voice is weak, and part of it is because of just hearing his name and hearing the word return in the same sentence is just do this. Pull something out of the ETB bag. I'll believe it when I see it. Seriously, I'll believe it when I see it. When the UFC finally announces Conor McGregor is back in the octagon, that's when I believe he will be back.
Okay, please tell me I'm not crazy, but when he shaved his beard and posted the first photo of him with no beard on Instagram, did you think at first that it wasn't real? Because at first I didn't think it was real.
Oh, my eyes. My eyes. Yeah, no, I didn't think it was real. But let's talk about it. So, Conor McGregor, we actually reported, Aaron Bronstetter reported, and we talked about it like last month, that Conor McGregor had been the only UFC fighter not tested by USADA in the year of 2022. And we come to find out in the weeks afterwards that McGregor isn't even in the USADA pool, which would indicate a formal retirement. Now, supposedly, he's back in the pool and he's looking for an exemption, kind of like what Brock Lesnar got that exemption from the 6 months that you have to be in the pool for before returning to the cage. Conor McGregor wants a similar sort of exemption. Is he going to get one? I don't know.
I would say, given who he is,
probably.
Yeah.
But the reason that he was talking, and Zain, try to correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, I kind of compared it on with my ETB guys to Andy Pettit in that, hey, I want to get all these treatments for my injury, in this case, the leg I broke against Dustin, and I can't get those treatments because they are on USADA's banned list.
Yeah, that isn't a bad comparison. I was going to say, in MMA terms, it's more like a Brock Lesnar situation.
Yeah, it definitely is more of a Brock Lesnar situation. I'm just saying Conor's reasoning is that, hey, if I'm not going to be fighting, if I'm going to be doing movies and such, why am I in the USADA pool if by exiting I can get treatments for this leg quicker? I can get, I don't know. I don't know, the cow growth hormone or something like that.
Yeah, well, knowing he's Conor McGregor, he's going to find a way. And you already know that probably means little hint. I don't have any sources to back this up, but if I were to predict the future, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, International Fight Week, I'm calling it now. Oh, that's gonna be the fight. It's gonna be a main event, and it's gonna be over a title fight because Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor. That's exactly what the UFC is gonna do. McGregor versus Chandler, International Fight Week, main event for whatever UFC that ends up being, probably UFC 287, 288, somewhere in there. That's what it's probably going to end up being, in my opinion.
For an interim belt, just because it's Conor, or just they don't need one because they sold Conor Dustin without one. But I remember the rumors leading.
Knowing how weird the UFC is, yeah, it'll probably end up being for an interim title that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, remember that in the lead up this year, that in the months after, in the months leading up after Oliveira, or they were talking about Oliveira in May and Oliveira later in the year, they were saying, oh, McGregor's probably going to get the title shot, even though he hasn't won a lightweight fight since 2016.
Which is still true. He has not won a lightweight fight since 2016. That's still 100% accurate. And I just think, and it's no disrespect to the UFC, they're trying to promote their fighter, but for Dana to say that Conor's still one of the best in the world, on what basis?
I mean, maybe the basis of darn, you got me, I wasn't ready. I mean, maybe on the basis of, which is kind of obvious.
Yeah, that's true, but to have one win against no offense to him, but it's true, to have one win against a washed up Donald Cerrone, and that be your only win to show for it since 2016 is pretty laughable.
Yeah, he hasn't won. So he won the championship at lightweight at UFC 205 in 2016, and still, Zan, to this day.
To this day.
Thank you, Deontay. He still has not won a fight ever. I mean, he's got the one win at welterweight, like you said, but he hasn't won at lightweight since. He hasn't been beaten for the belt, but you know what? He hasn't defended either of his titles.
It's true. It's true. He's technically never lost the title. So who's the unofficial GOAT?
Rumor is he's still on a belt journey to this day. Oh wait, did I say it?
To this day.
He's still collecting all the titles.
And the rumor still has it that he still hasn't left his 2015 World Tour either.
Oh God. Crazy. Speaking of crazy, Zan, I want to show some footage, by the way. Zan, you'll be very familiar with this footage. So I'm not even gonna give a little transition. I'm just gonna play it.
I mean, so probably not gonna be no shaking hands. I'm gonna probably party on them. That's just what's gonna happen. That's just how I feel. Sportsmen is not alike. I just don't like them. So.
What's up, guys? One last question for you guys.
We got 3 weeks. Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait.
This question is for both of you. There's obviously been some really legendary Bellator rivalries in the past several years. Would you say that this fight between you two is the chance to be the biggest male Bellator fight in the history of the promotion? And if so, why?
Yeah, not just inside the bantamweight division, but I think this will be the biggest fight of the entire year throughout all of Bellator. I think Bellator Bantamweight division is really getting the respect that it deserves. It's the best division across all of MMA. We look at our top 5, top 7 guys, and it's just absolutely stacked. We would beat any other promotion. So just from a pure skill standpoint, I think we are going to get the respect, and the rivalry will be very big. But also just because of our personalities, I make guys bigger when they fight me. The spotlight is on them more. Nobody knew who Stots was before he fought me. He's 34 years old. He's been in this game for fucking ever. Nobody knew who he was. Everybody's saying, oh, Stots came out of nowhere. No, he came out of nowhere because now he's fighting Danny Sabatello. So yeah, I do think it'll be an absolutely massive fight. But we'll see.
I have literally more followers than you on every platform. So that's false news. Try again.
Are we going to face him?
I can't wait, bro. If you engage in anything other than humping my leg, fucked up, bro. I think you look fucking ass, dude.
Fix the cameras. Fix the cameras, please. Thank you.
That was footage that Zan took backstage at Bellator 288 in Chicago about 10 or so days ago, where they were promoting the main event for next week's Bellator 289 on December 9th, which is going to be headlined by the 2 semifinals for the Bellator Bantamweight Grand Prix, one of which being Raufeon Stots defending the interim Bantamweight Championship against Danny Sabatello. And Danny Sabatello is going to be in his 4th fight in Bellator, and he's kind of already made a name for himself through his wins in the cage and his trash talk afterwards, his post-fight promos and such. And man, he has had a lot to say. Clearly, he had a lot to say to Raufeon Stots there.
Yeah, he sure did. And I mean, what more can I say? It's gonna be a great fight. Do I wish I was covering that too? Yeah, absolutely. But what I can say is this is I can tell you this is brewing up to be arguably the biggest rivalry in the history of the promotion, and it's going to be absolute madness, and I cannot wait to see it. So I'm really excited. We'll get more into the fight next week, as I alluded to earlier, but this press conference was a thrill to be at, and those two guys can deliver on the mic, and they can deliver some pretty good entertainment. The only thing that's hard is that if you don't know the backstory between the two, then it's harder to really laugh about it. But it was pretty entertaining, to say the least.
And speaking of Zan, I managed to somehow at the last minute rope in Danny Sabatello to come and talk with us on the MMA Outsiders. So I got the chance just recently to speak with him. Shout out to Danny for an excellent interview, and shout out to Bellator for helping to set it up. And he did talk about his little little rivalry with Raufeon, all the trash talking that he does. He even made mention of the entire bantamweight, division. He didn't care. He doesn't care about Magomed and Pachi. He doesn't think Sergio is a real champion. He considers, as much as he hates Raufeon as the real champion of the division. He mentioned a lot. So if you know Danny Sabatello and his trash talk, this is going to be entertaining. If you don't know Danny Sabatello and his trash talk, you're in for quite a ride. It's not going to be anything like what he did with Alex Bohine with his humanizing athletes, where he kept saying Raufeon is a bitch over and over again. But it was definitely, it's definitely a fun experience. So let's throw it to this interview with Danny right now. It's Albano here, MMA Outsiders podcast and Fan-Sided MMA, joined here with Danny Sabatello, the Italian gangster. Big night of MMA for Bellator on December 9th, where Danny here is going to be challenging Raufeon Stots, interim Bantamweight Championship, semifinal in the Bantamweight Grand Prix. Danny, thanks so much for joining today.
Yep, thanks for having me on.
All right, so it's only been, 3 fights so far in Bellator, and I got to say, you have taken the world by storm quite a bit. What does it mean to you to have taken such a rise, not just a quick impact on the bantamweight division or on a certain division or a certain fan base, but just the entire promotion?
Yeah, it's really just a dream come true. I think one of the things that resonates really well with the fans is that when I talk trash and I am this certain type of person, that's actually who I really am. The fans can kind of feel if somebody's fake and they're kind of giving on a gimmick or cheesy or corny or anything like that, putting on a shtick. With me, I don't put on a shtick, and I think the fans know that they know that this is my electric personality. But obviously, none of this fucking works unless I go out there and I fucking win my fights. And the good thing is I don't just go out there and win my fights. I fucking dominate these guys. You look at my resume and I'm fighting really good elite fighters and I'm straight up dominating them. And then before and after the fight, I'm very electric on the mic. I think I talk the best trash talk that there is. So obviously it's been a very successful career so far, and it's only going to get bigger and better.
Yeah, you definitely have made the headlines this year for, as you said, your work on the mic. You have the gift of the gab. Has this always been something you've had naturally?
Yep, absolutely. I always talk trash no matter what it is. We could be playing ping pong, baseball. We could be flipping a coin to see who's going to call heads or tails. I'm always going to be talking trash. It's just what I do. It's what's really fun to me. Obviously it's good in MMA and people don't really do it as much. But one thing with me is I'm just having fun with it. I don't care if it sells fights or doesn't sell fights. If it gets people to love me or hate me, I don't really give a fuck. I'm just having fun with this. I absolutely love fighting and I love everything that surrounds it. I love everything that comes with it. I love the trash talking. I love the media. I love the spotlight. I love, obviously, the act of absolutely fighting. But I love everything about it. Obviously, trash talk is really fun to me, but also I really do believe in mental warfare. With this trash talk, it's very calculated and very smart. I have these guys reacting in a way that they don't really react. I get guys actually to talk trash when I fight them, and that's foreign territory to them. This is way different and way out of their comfort zone. They don't really talk trash in the Bellator Bantamweight division, and I have them all fucking saying my name and talking trash. So they're really all my sons out there, and it just makes it even better for me.
It definitely is something that separates you from the rest of this pack in this bantamweight title scene. And speaking of your trash talk, earning you a lot of fans, earning you quite a lot of hype with your fights. Obviously, you and Raufeon were there in Chicago not too long ago for the Bellator to promote your title fight. Obviously, you trained with Merrick Tatim, but you were born in Chicago. What was it like to be in your hometown crowd and just, promoting such a big fight for you?
Yeah, it was sick. I live down in South Florida and I go to the best gym in the world down at American Top Team, but Chicago will always be home. That's where my friends and family are. So it was absolutely electric to go back and promote the fight. Obviously, we were about 3 or 4 weeks out from the fight, so I couldn't go out and party with all my boys and have too much fun. It was really just a business trip. I went there on Friday, came back on Saturday. It was awesome. There was a massive crowd there that night. It was a great night of fights.
It was nice seeing that little bitch Raufeon Stots and getting in his head even more, if that's even possible. Obviously, he was very fucking nervous that night. He was shaking all over the place. He was doing his normal stuttering, what he always does when he talks trash to me. So anytime I can get in front of that guy or have him face to face with me, I think it's a win in my book because I get in his head even more. And I have this mental warfare down to a T with this guy. He's very scared. He's going to have a lot of built-up aggression. He's going to come out December 9th at the Mohegan Sun, and he's going to act like he's very excited. He's going to be putting a lot of energy and singing along to all these songs, and he's going to be acting like that he's really ready for this fight. But I know deep inside he's panicking, and that's a lot of nervous energy. You're going to look across from the cage, and it's just going to be me, a cold-blooded killer. Me, someone that's always done this shit, always talking trash before the fights, and him, he's going to be in foreign waters. And I think we're going to see it. I think the moment's going to be a little bit too big, a little bit too bright for him. And that's just what I want. I want to make this moment as big as possible because I'm somebody that rises to the occasion. You put pressure on me, you put the spotlight on me, and I'm going to be even better. And someone like him, I think that he's going to crumble under the spotlight.
So that leads me to my next question, because I did have my co-host Zain there at the backstage at the Bellator 288. What is it about Raufeon, specifically for those who don't know, that you just don't like? And is there something you see in him as a competitor that can kind of salvage some of that?
Yeah, he's just a tryhard. He's a fake motherfucker. He's very different from me. We're obviously very opposite types of people. Every time I go on Instagram or Twitter or any type of social media, he's always already liked that person's picture or commented on their stuff. He tries to get everybody to love him. He's just fake. He's a gym slut. He goes from gym to gym. He's not loyal to any team. Obviously just a very different person from me, opposite in every type of way. So I really just don't get along with people like that. I really want to put my fucking elbow through his skull just in terms of him as a person. But obviously when you go in there and in the cage and he's trying to take away my goals and my dreams, I'm going to hate the guy either way. But this one just feels different because I specifically don't like who he is as an individual. I never like fake people. I never fuck with that. And you look at me, I don't really give a fuck if people love me or hate me. I'm not going to give any fake laughs to people if shit's not funny. He's the opposite. He wants to be buddy-buddy with everybody. He's trying to buddy up with every other fighter out there. I don't really get it. I'm not in this fucking game to make friends. I'm in this game to be the best bantamweight of all fucking time. So we're just very different people. And his fighting style, it's just very different from mine. He doesn't specialize in anything. He's not very elite. And I think I'm just going to be able to expose him. I get 5 fucking rounds and 25 minutes to do so.
So I doubt it kind of matters in your mind, but should you get past Raufeon, obviously we got Magomed and Pachi in the other semifinal that night. I assume it doesn't matter which one of them wins. You'll take either of them on if you don't have a preference.
No, I don't really have a preference. They're not really on my level. I think my side of the bracket is more elite. I think me and Stots are better than Pachi and Magomed. But after I do face Stots, I don't really know who I'm going to face. If I were to have a prediction or pick somebody, I would say the Russian and Magomed, but I'm not too confident in that pick. They're not that high-level guys. Pachi is only good if he gets your back and has that body lock. But if he doesn't get there, he doesn't really look too good. And that Magomed guy can sometimes be tricky because he throws a lot of spinning attacks, which is very unorthodox. And they're small gloves, so they can put you out. But if he doesn't get that on the button, then he's kind of not very good. So I don't really care who I fight. I love talking trash, and I love getting in people's heads and having trash talk back with me. So Pachi would be a fun fight because I know he would talk the trash. I don't think Magomed speaks too clear of English, so I don't know if he'd be able to talk trash back. So again, I don't really care. It'd be nice to trash talk somebody and have it back and forth, but I don't really give a fuck. Either way, they're both fucked.
And now, considering just the level of hype that this fight with Raufeon has had, considering all the anticipation for this and all the hype that's been surrounding the Bantamweight Grand Prix over the past year, what do you think an undisputed title fight with Sergio would do? Do you think that could even be much higher hype and anticipation than this fight with Raufeon?
Yeah, absolutely 1000%. Right now I don't look at Sergio as the champion of this division. I look at Stots the champion. Sergio Pettis is a bitch. He's a pussy and he couldn't even make it to the fucking tournament. Plus, if you just look at his skill set, there's no way he's on par with me or Stots. So I do think Stots has the belt right now. I'm going to have to take it away from him. This isn't an interim title to me. This is an absolute title. But if you just go along based on my fights, my fight is the next biggest one. Anytime I'm fighting, it's absolutely huge. I'm only going to get bigger and brighter and more popular through my career. So when I do face Sergio, I will be even bigger, and that will make it an even bigger fight. Obviously, he is technically the champion, so that will just be a big fight in and of itself. But this is an absolute massive fight. I think this is one of the biggest fights in Bellator history with me and Stots. And I think any fight that I'm in is going to be one of the biggest fights in Bellator history. I'm an electric guy, and people want to see me fight, whether it's they want to see me get my fucking head knocked off or me knock a guy's fucking head off. People are going to want to tune in. They think I'm interesting. So any fight that I'm in is going to be bigger. And the next one, no matter what it is going to be even massiver. Stots doesn't really have too big of fights. He's 33, 34 years old. People think he came out of nowhere. No, he's been in this game for a while. You're just starting to hear about him now because of me, because he's fighting me. So any fight that I'm in is going to be absolutely massive. But this one against Sergio obviously will be even bigger because he does have the belt.
Any prediction on how this fight with Raufeon is going to end?
Yeah, I need to torture him first. I need to get him fucking dog tired. I want to dominate and impose my will on him. This won't be a successful fight in my book if I go out there and finish him right away. I want people to understand how much better than I am than this motherfucker. So what I got to do is dominate him for a few rounds, and then I'll TKO him probably in that 4th round.
And what ultimately would you say is the long-term goal in your career in this sport? Because it's just getting started.
Yeah, it is. I'm only 29 years old. I only started MMA about 4-ish years ago. I want to be the best fighter that ever lived. That's something I've always had on my eyes since I was born. I always knew I was going to go into fighting, and why not try to be the best? I think I have the capability to do it. I'm at the best gym in the world, and I have the dedication, heart, and God-given abilities too. So why not, shoot for the stars? I do think that one day I will be considered the best fighter of all time, but I just got to stay on the right path, stay focused, show up at the gym every day, twice a day, listen to my coaches, no matter what they say. And I should be, but obviously one fight at a time, one round at a time, 1 minute at a time. And that starts with Raufeon Stots, December 9th at the Mohegan Sun.
All right, last question, bit of a silly one, but your nickname is the Italian Gangster, and there is another person over in the UFC who has an Italian nickname, the Italian Dream, Marvin Vettori. What do you think of Marvin, and do you see yourself as a better representation of Italian MMA than him, or is he cool with you?
Yeah, I don't really follow the UFC too much, unless some of my teammates are fighting from American Top Team. I don't really tune in, but I do know Marvin. He's a great fucking fighter. He fucking hits like a truck. He's a great dude. I never met him, so I don't know him personally. I can't really talk if he's a good guy or not. I don't fucking know. I do root for him whenever he fights just because he does have the Italian background, but yeah, he's a great guy. I don't really know him too much, but yeah, I hope good things for him.
December 9th in Bellator is going to be a very big night. Danny Sabatello challenging Raufeon Stots for the interim Bantamweight Championship in the main event of the evening. Danny, thanks so much for joining.
Yep, thanks for having me on.
All right, big thank you once again to Danny for coming on and discussing Bellator 289. Like you said, Zain, before the interview, the more I think about this, the more I watch that interview, watch anything with Raufeon or with Danny Sabatello, I can't wait. Next week is going to be so much fun between that and between UFC 282.
For sure. It's a great time to be an MMA fan. But wait, Tom, we have more MMA to talk about, don't we?
Yes. So let's talk about this weekend's card, UFC Orlando. Yes, the UFC is not in the Apex for a fight night this weekend. They're actually going to have a crowd on them. And the main event, well, it's Wonderboy versus Loudmouth. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Kevin the Loudmouth Holland.
I'm going to have to correct you. It's more so Kevin Big Mouth Holland.
Big Mouth. Loudmouth, Big Mouth. Same difference.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was right because I don't know if he considers that sinful, but it seems like he takes his whole Big Mouth mantra very seriously, so I wanted to make that clear. Yes, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Kevin Holland in the main event of UFC Orlando in kind of a crossroads fight for both men. Kevin Holland really needs this win badly. Wonderboy Thompson has been on a little bit of a losing skid, as you can see there. He's only 2-3 in his last 5. He's lost a couple of tough fights in that stretch, including to Gilbert Burns as well. And this is one of those fights where I really do feel like, if you win this fight, you're slowly but surely, one step closer to getting back to a title shot. And if you lose this fight, there's a chance you may never crack the top 10 ever again in your career. Maybe not as much for Holland because he's still a little bit on the younger side in his career, but for Wonderboy Thompson, who's been a veteran for quite a bit, this is more so a must win for him, and a very, very good stylistic matchup. You have Holland, who kind of likes to do a little bit of everything. It's gotten better in the wrestling department, versus Wonderboy Thompson, who is more so of a Muay Thai karate fighter who likes to, set up his feints really well, close the distance and look for a big shot. This is one of those fights where you'll either see, in my opinion, a Wonderboy finish or a Holland decision. I really do feel like Holland is the upper hand in this fight, and I actually do think he gets it done. What do you think?
Yeah, I am concerned with Wonderboy having lost 3 of his last 5, being the older fighter. Holland, for as much as we call him Big Mouth, he is, he is talented. He is talented when he can be. Part of me wants to say maybe Wonderboy is going to be a little bit too experienced, but like we kind of mentioned, Wonderboy, Muay Thai striking background, obviously gets ripped about with the whole points fighting thing. But I think Holland, like you kind of mentioned, Zan, his wrestling, it's not expertise, but it definitely has gotten better. He's going to be quicker. I see this one going to a decision either way. My best bet in this one, we'll talk about best bets in just a second. My best bet in this one would be that this fight does indeed go the distance. But like you, my heart says Wonderboy, but my brain is saying Holland. And I'm leaning with my brain on this one, and I'm going to side with Holland.
Agreed. I do think either which way you look at it, though, it's going to be a fantastic fight that should definitely deliver a solid main event that would be a co-main event on any upcoming pay-per-view for sure.
Oh, did you say co-main event? Because we have an interesting co-main event too.
We sure do. We have former UFC champion Raufeon Stots taking on longtime veteran Bryan Barberena. And as you said, a very interesting co-main event. As I was alluding to earlier, I do think if Wonderboy versus Holland was on a pay-per-view, you could easily see that be a co-main event. But this co-main event that we have right here is a very solid fight. This is easily Barberena's toughest test of his career, the biggest name he's ever fought, and rightfully so. He's earned it. He's won 4 out of his last 5. He's fighting better than anyone's ever seen him. Dos Anjos has been a little inconsistent. He's been out with injuries. The last couple of years, was struggled to find his footing, ever since losing the belt a couple of years ago. And that also included a loss to the current champion Leon Edwards in that stretch. This is a big fight for RDA, and in my opinion, a bigger fight than Barberena. I do think that experience will play a factor here. I do like RDA to get the win, bounce back from his loss to Rafael Fiziev about 5 or 6 months ago, and I really do think that he has the tools to get it done. But don't be surprised if this fight goes over the 2.5 round mark, just considering that Barberena likes to make things a little interesting. He has a solid resume in the UFC. As you can see here, he's beat some of the biggest names in the sport, including Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown. And he also holds a win over Anthony Ivy, who was a pretty solid prospect at the time of when those two fought. So, he's been on a good run, and I feel like for sure to beat Dos Anjos, he's gonna have to finish him. And if he can't do that, I think he's going to lose the fight.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at RDA here, beat Renato Moicano, lost to Rafael, lost to Leon Edwards, Michael Chiesa. So he really, for what we talk about with his age and everything, for what we talk about with, is there going to come a day where basically he loses to somebody like a Bryan Barberena? I mean, the only people who have beaten RDA thus far have been the best of the best. They have been the top contenders. They have been the champions. Is Bryan Barberena going to be in that category, or can he be, regardless, the one who, maybe you don't expect to break through somehow? He's a plus 270 underdog, which I actually think is great value. 1, 2, 3, 4. He'll have a 4-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage. I see this one playing out pretty evenly as well, but I'm actually going to disagree, Zan. I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to go with a Brian Barberena decision on this one.
Interesting. Well, those are solid. Those are solid predictions. Regardless, though, it's going to be a great fight. Big fight in the welterweight division. Obviously, as we've alluded to earlier, two big welterweight fights at the top. We obviously have Leon Edwards and Usman looming in March for their colossal rematch, which should be very interesting. A couple other fights that jump off the card for me here. You want to take a look at Tai Tuivasa versus Sergey Pavlovich. Yeah, this one's going to be great. Who doesn't like watching Tuivasa fight? What do you think? What do you think of this one?
This is gonna be a fun one. This one, Zan screams, they're going to throw hands until one of them collapses to the ground. This is gonna be fun. Obviously, Tai Tuivasa has been taking a bit of a storm, ever since he knocked out Derek Lewis and jumped from like number 10 to like number 3. Obviously, he lost his last fight, which delivered some damage to him, but it was still a very entertaining fight. Pavlovich comes off his own first round finish of Derek Lewis, Abdurakhimov, and Marcelo Gome. And actually has a loss to Alistair Overeem, but he has the experience against him, Maurice Green. I would still lean towards Tai Tuivasa on this one. I mean, he did lose to Cyril Gane, but like I mentioned, Derek Lewis, he beat Augustus Sakai, Greg Hardy. He has the experience with Stefan Struve, Spivak, and Dos Santos. And the Cyril Gane fight, that was a really fun war that, it could have gone either way. One of those two could have been dropped, and it happened to be Tuivasa's time to get dropped. And this time, I think he'll do the dropping.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to make this bet as simple as possible, this fight not to go the distance is 100% the bet.
Oh, absolutely. That's the best bet of the night, I think.
For sure. That one will deliver and potentially a fight of the night implications.
What else we got on the card? We have, the return of Mendelziz.
And that'll be a tough fight. He's fighting Jack Hermanson. And Hermanson's no slouch in that division either. So, should be a good one.
Yeah. Definitely one to have a watch out for. Roman Zolziz, I mean, he's a plus 145 underdog, but Jack Hermansson has been kind of inconsistent in the octagon as of late. I don't even remember the last time we saw Hermansson fight. We actually haven't seen him fight. Oh, he fought in July against Chris Curtis. Forgot about that one. Which was a split decision loss. He had the win over Shabazian. So, I mean, it's possible. I would keep my eye on this one. I'd keep my eye on Roman Dolce. That might be an interesting underdog pick. And then also, Zan, I can't be remiss if we don't talk about this man who always seems to catch my eye every time he appears on a card. And that is Eric, ya boy.
Yep,
Anders.
we got Eric Anders versus Kyle Dawkins. And if this isn't fireworks, then this whole card will probably suck because these two guys are action packed. Anders, obviously a former football player. Dawkins, a high level wrestler. Prior to MMA, there's no way that this fight isn't boring.
I would hope not. Even the prelims look absolutely insane, Zan. Nico Price, Philip Rowe, Angela Hills fighting Emily Ducote, Clay Guida and Scott Holtzman, Mark Diakisi and Michael Johnson. Darren Elkins is on the prelims. This prelims card is actually pretty stacked. This should be a really fun card, honestly.
Sure. It sure is. funny enough, I actually know Clay Guida personally, so I never miss a Clay Guida fight. Do you think that this could end up being his last fight if he loses?
I mean, taking on Scott Holtzman, and this is going to be his 50th professional fight. Yeah, I could see win or lose this being I could see win or lose this ever being his last one. You never know with Clay Guida because he can still kind of grow at times, and then some fights he doesn't look good. So this is one of those where it's like, I could see it. 50 fights is a great career.
For sure. So now that we've kind of gone over a little bit of the card, best bets for me personally, I like Kevin Holland by decision. I like the co-main event not to go the distance. I like Darren Elkins money line, and I could actually also see Angela Hill and Emily Ducote ending in a decision as well. So those would be my three.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say Stephen Thompson, Kevin Holland goes the distance. I'm going to say Tuivasa Pavlovich does not go to distance. Angela Hill, Emily Ducote does go to distance. And then, let's see. I'll go with the Roman Dolizes money line.
Yeah, that
would be my four. Yeah, that would be my four. We do have one other fight to talk about. So Zain, are you gonna pay for BLK Prime $39.99 to watch Terrence Crawford fight David Avanesian?
No, but I'll 100% watch it other ways though.
Zain, we're making fun of this fight. Now watch David Avanesian knock out Terrence Crawford, become welterweight champion.
If that actually happened, we might actually need to quit being combat sports fans because then it would be obvious that we know absolutely nothing about the sport.
we would be the jinxes of combat sports.
Literally. But okay, so to give a little background, would you say that this is David Avanesian's biggest test to date? Because I would say yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy. Zain, this is a guy. Wait a minute. Yes? What am I saying? Zain, this is a guy who fought Shane Mosley. 45-year-old Shane Mosley, but Shane Mosley regardless.
You mean the same Sugar Shane Mosley that fought Floyd Mayweather in 2007?
Yeah, and David fought him in 2016.
Okay, I need you to be honest with me. Is this a tune-up fight for Terrence Crawford, or does this have the potential to be the biggest upset in boxing for the entire year?
Tune-up fight? Zain, I want to talk about the word fight. How do you use the word fight?
I mean, isn't that what it legally is? It's considered a fight, right?
Legally, it is a fight. It is sanctioned by an athletic commission, but Zain, boxing gets in its own way. How can we not? How we really are going to have this and not Crawford Spence? Good job, Heyman. Good job, Heyman and Aram. Good job.
Which was supposed to be 2 Saturdays ago, and it didn't happen.
Good job.
Good job.
No, I'm sarcastically. Good job.
I know.
Bravo, boxing. You're really outdoing yourself.
But yeah, I like Crawford to win in round 8 by TKO. That's my prediction.
I'm gonna go round 6.
Avanesian hangs in there for a little bit.
I'm gonna go round 6.
And what's going to happen next week when Avanesian wins, and we're going to have to ask ourselves what the hell happened?
He's going to win by 4th round knockout. No, wait a minute. If this is our luck, Zain, it's going to be Crawford's winning in the 12th round, and then Avanesian's going to knock him out in the last minute.
Could you imagine if he's down in the scorecards 11-0?
I would quit the media business.
And I think I would quit right along with you, which means that this show would go away too. Because it's obvious we can't pick fights.
I think if that happens, if Crawford loses, Bob Arum should just quit boxing.
Bob Arum should quit boxing and go retire as he should have probably about 15 years ago.
Oh, God.
Because he's what now? 60 years old now? So he's getting up there in age.
Zan,
hang on.
All I can
now I'm actually curious. Hang on. No, I'm wrong. I'm 30 years old. The man's 90 years old. He's 90 years old. So yeah, my original point still stands. He should have retired like 30 years ago, and he didn't do it.
Zan, this is the boxing world we're talking about, and sometimes these things happen in boxing. And well, Zan,
Sometimes these things happen in MMA.
The best part about him saying it is the literal 2-second pause.
sometimes these things happen in MMA. All right. I want to thank Danny Sabatello once again for joining us on the MMA Outsiders, being our very first guest for, I was going to say for the year, but really just for the show in general. Big shout out again to him and Bellator. I can't wait for their fight next week. I can't wait for the fights this weekend. So make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so that way you're with us for every single one of these fight weekends. Make sure to follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETV, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, follow the network, the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at ETB Network. You can follow Zain at ZanBando99. His work is on bjpen.com. Yep. And then you can find me on Twitter at Thomas J. Albano and at Talk Sports 9. My work is at Fansided MMA. Fun episode, Zan. Hope you enjoyed this coming weekend of fights. And next week, big one. Big Bellator and big UFC. 2-for-1 special.
Big one. We're rounding the home stretch of combat sports. And you know that when December rolls around, that's when the fights get bigger and they try to end the year with a bang. And that's literally what's happening both on the boxing front and the UFC front. So it should be exciting stuff to look forward to. This was a fantastic episode. I know both of us had a great time, and maybe our upset jinx ends this weekend, but who the hell knows? Maybe it doesn't at all. I don't know. But all I know is thank you again so much for everyone who tuned in to listen. And as Tom and I always like to say, be Joe Piper.
Be Joe Piper. We'll see you next week, everybody. Take care.
See you next week.